Thief of Time, Part 14. People were living in the attic. There was a whole family up there. Susan wondered if their presence was official or unofficial, or one of those in-between states that were rather common in Ankh-Morpork, where there was always a chronic housing shortage. So much of the city's life took place on the street because there was no room for it anywhere inside. Whole families were raised in shift so that the bed could be used for 24 hours a day. By the look of it, the caretakers and the men who knew the way to Qa'Rajh's 3 large pink women and 1 piece of gauze had moved their families into the rambling attics. The rescuer had simply moved in on top of them. A family, or at least one shift of it, was seated on benches around a table, frozen in timelessness. Lady LeSean removed her hat, hung it on the mother, and shook out her hair. Then she unwrapped the heavy bandages from her nose and mouth. They revealed an exquisite mask of a face that had nevertheless been made up by a clown, probably a blind clown, and one who was wearing boxing gloves. In a fog, the woman looked at the world through panda eyes, and her lipstick touched her mouth only by accident. She looked down when she caught Susan's stare. "I know what I look like," she said. "I'm afraid. I'm losing control. I'm sorry. There's just too much. It's all too... Ever since I just feel so..." She stopped and attempted to pull herself together. "My name is Muriel LeSean. I know you, Susan Stohellit. I do not know the young man, although there is something familiar about him. I take it you're here to destroy the clock." "To stop it," said Lopsang. Hold on, said Susan. "This makes no sense. Auditors hate everything about life, and you are an auditor, aren't you?" "I have no idea what I am," sighed Lady LeSean. "But right now I know that I'm everything an auditor should not be. We have to be stopped." "With chocolate?" said Susan. "The sense of taste is new to us, alien. We have no defenses." "But chocolate..." "A dry toast almost killed me," said her ladyship. "Susan, can you imagine what it is like to experience taste for the first time? We build our bodies well. Oh yes, lots of taste buds. Even water is like wine. But chocolate, even the mind stops. There is nothing but the taste." She sighed. "I imagine it's a rather wonderful way to die." "It doesn't seem to affect you," said Susan suspiciously. "The bandages and the gloves," said Lady LeSean. "Even then it is all I can do to not give in. Oh, where are my manners? Do sit down, pull up a small child." Lopsang and Susan exchanged a glance. Lady LeSean noticed it. "I said something wrong?" she said. "We don't use people as furniture," said Susan. "But surely they will not be aware of it," said her ladyship. "We will," said Lopsang. "That's the point, really." I have so much to learn. There is so much context to being human, I'm afraid. Sir, can you stop the clock?" "I don't know how to," said Lopsang, "but I think I should try. I will try." "Would the clockmaker know?" "He's here." "Where?" said Susan. "Just down the passage," said Lady LeSean. "You carried him here? He was barely able to walk. He was hurt badly in the fight." "What?" said Lopsang. "How could he walk at all? We're outside time." Susan took a deep breath. "He carries his own time just like you," she said. "He is your brother." And it was a lie, but he wasn't ready for the truth. By the look of his face, he wasn't even ready for the lie. "Twins," said Miss Ogg, as she picked up the brandy glass, looked at it, and put it down. "There wasn't one. There was twins. 2 boys, but..." She turned on Susan, a glare like a thermic lance. "You'll be thinking this is an old biddy of a midwife," she said. "You'll be thinking, what does she know?" Susan paid her the courtesy of not lying. "Part of me was," she admitted. "Good answer. Part of us thinks all kinds of things," said Mrs. Ogg. "Part of me is thinking, who is this horrid little miss who talks to me as if I was a kiddie of 5? But most of me is thinking she's got a heap of troubles of her own and has seen plenty of things any humans shouldn't have to see. Mind you, part of me says, so have I. Seeing things a human shouldn't have to see makes us human. Well, miss, if you have any sense, part of you is thinking there's a witch in front of me who's seen my granddad many times when she's sat by a sick bed that's suddenly become a deathbed, and she'll be ready to spit in his eye when the time comes, so she could probably bother me considerably right now. If she puts her mind to it, that is. Understand? Let's all keep our parts to ourselves." And suddenly she gave Susan a wink, as the high priest said to the actress. "I absolutely agree," said Susan. "Completely. Right, said Miss Hogg. So, twins. Well, it was her first time, and human wasn't exactly a familiar shape with her. I mean, you can't do what comes naturally when you ain't exactly natural, and twins ain't quite the right word. A brother, said Lopsang. The clockmaker? Yes, said Susan. But I was a foundling. So was he. I want to see him now. That might not be a good idea, said Susan. I'm not interested in your opinion, thank you. Lopsang turned to Lady Lishan. Down that passage? Yes, but he's asleep. I think the clock upset his mind, and also he was hit in the fight. He says things in his sleep. Says what? The last thing I heard him say before I came to find you was, we're so close any passage might do, said her ladyship. She looked from one to the other. Have I said something wrong? Susan put her hand over her eyes. Oh dear. I said that, said Lopsang, just after we came up the stairs. He glared at Susan. Twins, right? I've heard about this sort of thing. What one thinks the other one thinks too. Susan sighed. Sometimes, she thought, I really am a coward. Something like that, yes, she said. I'm going to see him then, even if he can't see me. Damn it, thought Susan, and hurried after Lopsang as he headed along the passage. Lady Lishan trailed behind them both, looking deeply concerned. Jeremy was lying on a bed, although it was no softer than anything else in this timeless world. Lopsang stopped and stared. He looks quite like me, he said. Oh yes, said Susan. Thinner, perhaps. Could be, yes. Different lines in his face. You've led different lives, said Susan. How did you know about him and me? My grandfather takes an interest in this sort of thing. I found out some more by myself too, she said. Why should we interest anyone? We're not special. This is going to be quite hard to explain, Susan looked around at Lady Lishan. How safe are we here? The signs upset them, said her ladyship. They tend to keep away. I, shall we say, took care of the ones that followed you. And then you better sit down, Mr. Lott, said Susan. It might help if I told you about me. Well, my grandfather is death. That's a strange thing to say. Death is just the end of life. It's not a person. Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you. A mind whipped around the room and the light changed. Shadows formed on Susan's face. A faint blue light outlined her. Lopsang swallowed. The light faded. The shadows vanished. There is a process called death, and there is a person called death, said Susan. That is how it works. And I am Death's granddaughter. Is this going too fast? No, although right up until just now you looked human. Both of my parents were human. There's more than one kind of genetics. Susan paused. You look human too. Human is a very popular look in these parts. You'd be amazed. Except that I am human. Susan gave a little smile that, on anyone less obviously in full control of themselves, might have seemed slightly nervous. Yes, she said. And then again, no. No? Take war now, said Susan, backing away from the point. Big man, hearty laugh, tends to fart after meals. As human as the next man, you might say. But the next man is death. He's human-shaped too, and that's because humans invented the idea of ideas, and they think in human shapes. God, get back to the and then again no, will you? Your mother is time. No one knows who my mother is. I could take you to the midwife, said Susan. Your father found the best there has ever been. She's delivered you. Your mother was time. Lopsang sat with his mouth open. It was easier for me. When I was very small, my parents used to let me visit my grandfather. I thought every grandfather had a long black robe and rode a pale horse. And then they decided that maybe that wasn't the right environment for a child. They were worried about how I was going to grow up. She laughed without mirth. I had a very strange education, you know. Math, logic, that sort of thing. And then, when I was a bit younger than you, a rat turned up in my room and suddenly everything I thought I knew was wrong. I'm human. I do human things. I'd know if you had to live in the world. Otherwise, how could you learn how to be human? Susan said, as kindly as she could. And my brother, what about him? Here it comes, Susan thought. He's not your brother, said Susan. I lied a bit. I'm sorry. But you said, I had to lead up to it, said Susan. It's one of those things you have to get a hold of a bit at a time. I'm afraid he's not your brother. He's you. Then who am I? Susan sighed. You. Both of you. Are you. And there I was, and there she was, said Mrs. Ogg, and out the baby came, no problem there, but that's always a trying moment for a new mum, and there was... She paused, her eyes peering through the windows of memory. Like a feeling that the world had stuttered, and I was holding the baby, and I looked down, and there was me delivering a baby, and I looked at me, and I looked at me, and I remembered saying, "This is a fine to do, Miss Ogg," and she, who was me, said, "You never said a truer word, Miss Ogg." And then it all went strange, and there I was, just one of me holding two babes. Twins, Susan said. You could call them twins, yes, I suppose you could, said Miss Ogg, but I always thought that twins is two little souls born once, not one born twice. Susan waited. Mrs. Ogg looked in the mood to talk. So I said to man, I said, "What now?" And he said, "Is that any business of yours?" And I said, he could be damn sure it was my business, and he could look me in the eye and I'd speak my mind to anyone. But I was thinking, you're in trouble now, my girl, because it's all gone mythic. Mythic, said the school teacher, Susan. Yep, with extra myth. And you could get into big trouble with mythic. But the man just smiled and said he must be brought up human until he's of age, and I thought, yep, it's gone mythic all right. I could see he hadn't got a clue about what to do next, and was all about to be down to me. Miss Ogg took a suck at her pipe, and her eyes twinkled at Susan through the smoke. I don't know how much experience you have with this sort of thing, my girl, but sometimes when the high and mighty make big plans, they don't always think about the fine little details. Yes, I'm a fine detail, Susan thought. One day Death took it into his skull to adopt a motherless child, and I'm a fine detail. She nodded. I thought, how does this go in a mythic kind of way? Miss Ogg went on. I mean, technically, you could see where in that area where the prince gets brought up as a swineherd until he manifests his destiny. But there's not that many swineherding jobs around these days, and poking hogs with a stick is not all it's cracked up to be, believe you me. So I said, well, I heard the guilds down in the big cities took in foundlings out of charity and looked after them well enough. There's many well-set-up men and women who started life that way. There's no shame in it. Plus, if the destiny doesn't manifest as per schedule, he'd have set his hands to a good trade, which would be a consolation. Where swineherding? Well, that's just swineherding. You're giving me a stern look, miss. Well, yes, it was a rather chilly decision, wasn't it? Someone has to make him, said Miss Ogg sharply. Besides, I've been around for some time, and I noticed that them as has it in them to shine will shine through 6 layers of muck, whereas those who ain't shiny won't shine however much you buff 'em. You may think otherwise, but it was me standing there. She investigated the bowl of her pipe with a matchstick. Eventually she went on. And that was it. I would have stayed, of course, because there wasn't so much as a crib in the place, but the man took me aside and said thank you, and that it was time to go. Why would I argue? There was love there. It was in the air. But I won't say that I sometimes wonder how it all turned out. I really do. There were differences, Susan had to admit. 2 different lives had indeed burned their unique tracks on their faces, and the selves had been born a second or so apart, and a lot of the universe can change in a second. Think of identical twins, she told herself, but they are 2 different selves occupying bodies that at least start out identical. They don't start out as identical selves. He looks quite like me, said Lopsang, and Susan blinked. She leaned closer to the unconscious form of Jeremy. Say that again, she said. I said he looks quite like me, said Lopsang. Susan glanced at Lady Lishon, who said, I saw it too, Susan. Who saw what, said Lopsang. What are you hiding from me? His lips move when you speak, said Susan. They try to form the same words. He can pick up my thoughts. It's a bit more complicated than that, I think. Susan picked up a limp hand and gently pinched the web of the skin between thumb and forefinger. Lopsang winced and glanced at his own hand. A patch of white skin was now reddening. Not just thoughts, said Susan. This close you can feel his pain. Your speech controls his lips. Lopsang stared down at Jeremy. Then what will happen, he said slowly, when he comes around? I'm wondering the same thing, said Susan. Perhaps you shouldn't be here. But this is where I have to be. We at least should not stay here, said Lady Lishon. I know my kind. They will have been discussing what to do. The signs will not hold them forever, and I have run out of soft centers. What are you supposed to do when you are where you're supposed to be, said Susan. Lobsang reached down and touched Jeremy's hand with his fingertip. The world went white. Susan wondered later if this was what it would be like at the heart of a star. It wouldn't be yellow, you wouldn't see the fire. There would just be the searing whiteness of every overloaded sense screaming all at once. It faded gradually into a mist. The walls of the room appeared, but she could see through them. There were other walls beyond and other rooms, transparent as ice and visible only at the corners and where the light caught them. In each one, another Susan was turning to look at her. And those rooms went on forever. Susan was sensible. It was, she knew, a major character flaw. It did not make you popular or cheerful, and, this seemed to her to be the most unfair bit, it didn't even make you right. But it did make you definite. She was definite that what was happening around her was not, in any accepted sense, real. That was in itself not a problem. Most of the things humans busied themselves with weren't real either. But sometimes the mind of the most sensible person encountered something so big, so complex, so alien to all understanding that it told itself little stories about it instead. Then, when it felt it understood the story, it felt it understood the huge, incomprehensible thing. And this, Susan knew, was her mind telling herself a story. There was a sound like great heavy metal doors slamming one after another, getting louder and faster. The universe had reached a decision. The other glass room vanished, the walls were clouded, the colors rose, pastel at first, then darkening as a timeless reality flowed back. The bed was empty. Lobsang had gone, but the air was full of slivers of blue light, turning and swiveling like ribbons in a storm. Susan remembered to breathe again. "Oh," she said aloud. "Destiny." She turned. The bedraggled Lady Lishon was still staring at the empty bed. "Is there another way out of here?" "There's an elevator at the end of the corridor, Susan, but what happened to—" "Not Susan," said Susan sharply. "It's Miss Susan. I'm only Susan to my friends, and you are not one of them. I don't trust you at all." "I don't trust you myself either," said Lady Lishon meekly. "Does that help? Show me this elevator, will you?" It turned out to be nothing more than a large box the size of a small room that hung from a web of ropes and pulleys in the ceiling. It had been installed recently, by the look of it, to move the large works of art around. Sliding doors occupied most of one wall. "There are capstans in the cellar for winching in up," said Lady Lishon. "Downward journeys are slowed safely because of a mechanism by which the weight of the descending elevator causes water to be pumped into rainwater systems on the roof, which in turn can be released back into a hollow counterweight that assists in the elevation of heavier items of—" "Thank you," said Susan quickly. "But what it really needs in order to descend is time." Under her breath she added, "Can you help?" The ribbons of blue light orbited her like puppies anxious to play, then drifted toward the elevator. "However," she added, "I believe time might be on our side now." Miss Tangerine was amazed at how fast the body learned. Until now, auditors had learned by counting. Sooner or later, everything simply came down to numbers. If you knew all the numbers, well, then you knew everything. Often the later was quite a lot later, but that did not matter, because for an auditor time was just another number, but a brain, a few soggy pounds of gristle, counted numbers so fast that they stopped being numbers at all. She'd been astonished at how easily it could direct a hand to catch a ball in the air, calculating future positions of hand and ball without her even being aware of it. The senses seemed to operate her and present her with conclusions before she even had time to think. At the moment she was trying to explain to other auditors that not feeding an elephant when there was in fact no elephant not to feed was not in fact impossible. Miss Tangerine was one of the faster learning auditors and had already formulated a group of things, events, and situations that she categorized as bloody stupid. Things that were bloody stupid could be dismissed. Some of the others were having difficulty understanding this, but now she stopped in mid-harangue when she heard the rumble of the elevator. "Do we have someone upstairs?" she demanded. The auditors around her shook their heads. Ignore this sign had produced too much confusion. Then someone is coming down, said Miss Tangerine. They're out of place. They must be stopped. We must discuss, an auditor began. Do what I say, you organic organ. It's a matter of personality, said Lady Lishan, as Susan pushed open a door in the roof and stepped out onto the leads. Yes, said Susan, looking around at the silent city. I thought you didn't have them. They will have them now, said Lady Lishan, clapping out behind her. The personalities define themselves in terms of other personalities. Susan, prowling along the parapet, considered this strange statement. You mean there will be flaming rows, she said. Yes, we have never had egos before. Well, you seem to be managing. Only by becoming completely and utterly insane, said her ladyship. Susan turned. Lady Lishan's hat and dress had become even more tattered, and she was shedding sequins. The journey through the museum had done nothing at all for her makeup either. You don't look insane, lied Susan, as such. Thank you, but sanity is defined by the majority, I'm afraid. Do you know the saying, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts? Of course, Susan scanned the rooftops for a way down. She did not need this. The thing seemed to want to talk, or rather, to chatter aimlessly. It is an insane statement, it is a nonsense, but now I believe that it is true. Good, that elevator should be getting down about now. Slivers of blue light like trout slipping through a stream danced around the elevator door. The auditors gathered. They had been learning. Many of them had acquired weapons, and a number of them had taken care not to communicate to others that gripping something offensive in the hand seemed a very natural thing to do. It spoke to something right down in the back of the brain. It was therefore unfortunate that when a couple of them pulled open the elevator door, it was to reveal slightly melting in the middle of the floor a cherry liqueur chocolate. The scent wafted. There was only one survivor, and when Miss Tangerine ate the chocolate, there wasn't even that. One of life's little certainties, said Susan, standing on the edge of the museum parapet, is that there is generally a last chocolate hidden in all those empty wrappers. Then she reached down and grabbed the top of the drainpipe. She wasn't certain how this would work. If she fell, but would she even fall? There was no time to fall in. She had her own personal time. In theory, if anything so definite as a theory existed in a case like this, that meant she could just drift down to the ground. But the time to test that theory out was only when you had no other choice. A theory was just an idea, but a drainpipe was a fact. The blue light flickered around her hands. Lopsang, she said quietly. It is you, isn't it? That name is as good as any for us. The voice was as faint as a breath. This may seem like a stupid question, but where are you? We're just a memory, and I'm weak. Oh, Susan slid a little further. But I will grow strong. Get to the clock. What's the point? There was nothing we could do. Times have changed. Susan reached the ground. Lady Lishan followed, moving clumsily. Her evening dress had acquired several more tears. May I offer a fashion tip? Said Susan. It would be welcomed, said her ladyship politely. Long cerise bloomers with that dress? Not a good idea. No? They're quite colourful and quite warm. What should I have chosen instead? With that cut? Practically nothing. That would have been acceptable? Susan glanced at the thought of unfolding the complex laws of lingerie to someone who wasn't even, she felt, anybody at all. To anyone likely to find out, yes, she finished. It would take too long to explain. Lady Lishan does. All of it does, she said. Even clothing. Skin substitutes to preserve body heat. So simple, so easy to say, but there are so many rules and exceptions, impossible to understand. Susan looked along Broadway. It was thick with silent traffic, but there was no sign of an auditor. We'll run into more of them, she said aloud. Yes, there will be hundreds, at least, said Lady Lishan. Why? Because we've always wondered what life is like. Then let's get up into Sapphire Street, said Susan. What is there for us? Weinreich and Böttcher. Who are they? I think the original Herr Weinreich and Frau Böttcher died a long time ago. But the shop still does very good business, said Susan, darting across the street. We need ammunition. Lady Lishan caught up. Oh, they make chocolate, she said. Does a bear poo in the woods? Said Susan, and realized her mistake straight away. Teaching small children for any time can do this to a vocabulary. Too late. Lady Lishon looked thoughtful for a moment. Yes, she said at last. Yes, I believe that most varieties do excrete, as you suggest, at least in the temperate zones, but there are several that... I meant to say that yes, they do indeed make chocolate, said Susan. Vanity, vanity, thought Lutze, as the milk cart rattled through the silent city. Ronnie would have been like a god, and people of that stripe don't like hiding. Not really hiding. They like to leave a little clue, some emerald tablet somewhere, some code in some tomb under the desert, something to say to a keen researcher, I was here, and I was great. What else had the first people been afraid of? Night, maybe, cold, bears, winter, stars, the endless sky, spiders, snakes, one another. People had been afraid of so many things. He reached into his pack for the battered copy of The Way and opened it at random. Cohen, 97. Do unto otters as you would have them do unto you. No real help there. Besides, he'd occasionally been unsure that he'd written that one down properly, although it certainly had worked. He'd always left aquatic mammals well alone, and they had done the same to him. He tried again. Cohen, 124. It's amazing what you see if you keep your eyes open. What's the book, monk? Said Ronnie. Oh, it's just a little book, said Lutze. He looked around. The cart was passing a funeral parlor. The owner had invested in a large plate glass window, even though the professional undertaker does not, in truth, have that much to sell that looks good in a window, and they usually make do with dark, somber drapes and perhaps a tasteful urn. And the name of the fifth horseman. Ha! Said Lutze quietly. Something funny, monk. Only obvious when you think about it, said Lutze, as much to himself as he did to Ronnie. Then he turned in his seat and struck out his hand. Pleased to meet you, he said. Let me guess your name. And then he said it. Susan had been unusually inexact. To call Weinreich and Böttcher chocolate makers was like calling Leonard of Quirm a decent painter who also tinkered with things, or Death not someone you'd want to meet every day. It was accurate, but it did not tell the entire story. For one thing, they didn't make, they created. There's an important difference, usually around $10 a pound. And while the select little shop sold the results, it didn't do anything so crass as to fill the window with them. That would suggest an over-eagerness. Generally, W&B had a display of silk and velvet drapes with, on a small stand, perhaps one of their special pralines and no more than 3 of their renowned frosted caramels. There was no price tag. If you had to ask the price of W&B's chocolates, you couldn't afford them. And if you tasted one and still couldn't afford them, you'd save and scrimp and rob and sell elderly members of your family for just one more of those mouthfuls that fell in love with your tongue and turned your soul into whipped cream. There was a discreet drain in the pavement in case people standing in front of the window drooled too much. Weinreich and Böttcher were naturally for foreigners, and according to Ankh-Morpork's Guild of Confectioners, they did not understand the peculiarities of the city's taste buds. Ankh-Morpork people, said the guild, were hearty, no-nonsense folk who did not want chocolate that was stuffed with cocoa liquor, and were certainly not like effete la-di-da foreigners who wanted cream in everything. In fact, they actually preferred chocolate made mostly from milk, sugar, suet, hooves, lips, miscellaneous squeezings, rat droppings, plaster flies, tallows, bits of tree, hair, lint, spiders, and powdered cocoa husks. This meant that according to the food standards of the great chocolate centers in Belgravia and Quirm, Ankh-Morpork chocolate was formerly classed as cheese, and only escaped through being the wrong color, being defined as tile grout. Susan allowed herself one of their cheaper boxes per month, and she could easily stop at the first layer if she wanted to. You needn't come in, she said, as she opened the shop door. Rigid customers lined the counter. Please call me Miria. I don't think I... Please, said Lady Lishon meekly. A name is important. Suddenly, in spite of everything, Susan felt a brief pang of sympathy for the creature. Oh, very well, Miria, you needn't come in. I can stand it. But I thought chocolate was a raging temptation, said Susan, being firm with herself. It is. They stared up at the shelves behind the counter. Miria, Miria, said Susan, speaking only some of her thoughts aloud. from the Ephebian word myrios, meaning innumerable, and Lishon is a crude pun of legion. Oh dear, we thought our name should say what a thing was, said her ladyship, and there's safety in numbers. I'm sorry. Well, these are their basic assortments, said Susan, dismissing the shop display with a wave of her hand. Let's try the back room. Are you all right? I'm fine. I'm fine, murmured Lady Lishon, swaying. You're not going to pig out on me, are you? I know about willpower. The body craves chocolate, but the mind does not. At least, so I tell myself, and it must be true. The mind can overrule the body, otherwise, what is it for? I've often wondered, said Susan, pushing open another door. Ah, the magician's cave. Magic? They used magic here. Nearly right. Lady Lishon leaned on the door frame for support when she saw the tables. Oh, she said, I can detect sugar, milk, butter, cream, vanilla, hazelnut, almonds, walnuts, raisins, orange peel, various liqueurs, citrus pectin, strawberries, raspberries, essence of violets, cherries, pineapples, pistachios, oranges, limes, lemons, coffee, cocoa. Nothing there to be afraid of, right? Said Susan, surveying the workshop for useful weaponry. Cocoa is just a rather bitter bean, after all. Yes, but... Lady Lishon clenched her fists, shut her eyes, and bared her teeth. Put them all together and they make, steady now, steady. The will can overrule emotions. The will can overrule the instincts, the auditor chanted. Good, good. Now just work your way up to the bit where it says chocolate, okay? That's the hard one. In fact, it seemed to Susan, as she walked past the vats and counters, that chocolate lost some of its attraction when you saw it like this. It was the difference between seeing the little heaps of pigment and seeing the whole picture. She selected a syringe that seemed designed to do something intensely personal to female elephants, although she decided that here it was probably used for doing the wiggly bits of decoration. And over here was a small vat of cocoa liquor. She stared around at the trays and trays of fondant creams and marzipans and marked caramels. Oh, and here was an entire table of soul cake eggs. But these weren't the hollow-shelled cardboard-tasting presents for children. Oh, no. These were the confectionery equivalent of fine, intricate jewelry. On the corner of her eye, she saw movement. One of the statue-like workers bent over her tray. Praline dreams were shifting almost imperceptibly. Time was flowing into the room. Pale blue light glinted in the air. She turned and saw a vaguely human figure hovering beside her. He was featureless and transparent as mist, but in her head it said, I am stronger. You are my anchor, my link to this world. Can you guess how hard it is to find it again in so many? Get me to the clock. Susan turned and thrust the icing syringe into the arms of the groaning Miria. Grab that, and make some kind of sling or something. I want you to be carrying as many of those chocolate eggs as possible, and the creams, and the liqueurs. Understand? You can do it. Oh gods, there was no alternative. The poor thing needed some kind of moral boost. Please, Miria, and that's a stupid name. You're not many, you're one. Just be yourself. Unity, that'd be a good name. The new Unity raised a mascara-streaked face. Yes, it is a good name. Susan snatched as much merchandise as she could carry, aware of some rustling behind her, and turned to find Unity standing to attention, holding, by the look of it, a benchwork of assorted confectionery in a sort of big cerise sack. Oh, good. Intelligent use of the materials at hand, said Susan weakly. Then the teacher within her cut in and added, I hope you brought enough for everybody.